Tell me about a time you fixed a problem that was outside of your team's scope. Hey everyone, I'm super excited to be doing a Amazon mock PM interview today with Anirudh. We're going to be focusing on a behavioral PM interview question that are commonly asked by companies like Amazon. But before we jump into it, Anirudh, could you share a little bit more about yourself and your background?
Sure. Hi, everyone. Previously, before joining Amazon, I was working at Verizon Media, and I have been like interviewing for this PM positions for a while, and that's where I came to know about this Try Exponent, and I think like a lot of things here were very helpful, especially like the passive and active check-in and how to approach a design question. And I would just like to share more about how I prepared, and especially for behavioral questions, so that you can use it for your interview preparation going forward.
That's awesome. And it's always great to have people who've used Exponent give back to the community. So thanks, Anirudh, for being willing to be on the show. And congratulations on getting the Amazon job through Exponent. So without further ado, I'd love to get into this mock interview, Anirudh. The question that I'd like to ask you today for this mock PM interview is, tell me about a time you fixed a problem that was outside of your team's scope.
Sure. Uh, So let me give about an example of my recent role at Verizon Media. Uh, so first, let me explain you the system. There's a product called Salesforce, which we use for customer data management, and there's something called OFA, which is like Oracle Financials Application, which is used for maintaining the customer data. So essentially, like since I was working with the ads team, so any new customers which are onboarded in Verizon Media, their records are first created in Salesforce, and then there is a data integration of a like 4-hour feed, which is then used to ingest that data into the Oracle financial system. So are you at least able to understand like the system, what I am talking to about?
Yes, that makes a lot of sense. And thanks for checking in. Tell me more about kind of what the situation was or what came up.
Sure. So there was a recon system which I had developed, which basically tells about any accounts which are created in Salesforce and which are not present in Oracle financial system. So this recon is basically used to identify missing accounts, because if an account is not available in the financial system, then we cannot bill them or recognize revenue. So I still remember it was like April 2016, and that report would run daily, and the count of missing accounts would just increase every day. I think it was like 10, 50, 100, and even reached like 200 or 300, which was really concerning to me, because if I was not able to find the root cause, then uh, it would have a significant revenue or billing impact. So are you able to understand like what was the problem and why was it critical?
Yeah, I'd be curious to hear a little bit more. What stakeholders were involved in this, or like who was mostly concerned? I mean, obviously, revenue and billing impact is pretty important to the company, but were there certain stakeholders that you were working with in this context?
Sure, yeah. So apart from revenue and billing, another stakeholders were the product teams. So like depending on the advertiser signed contract with which advertising product, like they were our stakeholders. Then the Salesforce team, which is maintaining the customer data. So on a high level, I think these teams are the broad stakeholders.
Got it. Thanks for answering the question. You can keep going.
Yeah, sure. So when I started analyzing, like I first tried to see like the data integration, like was there any change in the code of how we ingest the data. I didn't find any issues. Secondly, I even asked the Salesforce team that were there any changes on how data is sent out? They said, no, there is nothing. And it just puzzled me out that how, if there is no change, like this number is just going up and up. So I actually then tried one of my well-tested ways that, like, if a lot of things are unbroken, like broken, then just choose one specific example, deep dive it, find out the root cause, and see if that fixing that would help to fix everything else. So for this, I just took one sample account which was missing, and I had a meeting with the Salesforce team uh, just to deep dive on what happened. And there was one thing which I noticed was that while I was analyzing the data, I saw that there were a lot of accounts which were missing on 14th April 2016, which seemed very weird to me. Like, why is this specific date? So I asked the analyst, that Salesforce analyst, why is can you just send me the data file for 14th April 2016, which was sent to our system? And interestingly, none of the records for 14th April were in our system.
Hmm.
So are you able to understand so far that, like, basically what I'm talking about is when I started analyzing, I just saw on specific date, like there were so many missing accounts.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Yeah. I'm curious what happened or how. Yeah. Now it's a mystery.
Yeah. So I just told him, okay, and I first confirmed in our system that we did not got that file. I checked the logs, and I told him, okay, can you check the job in your system which creates those files on what happened? And he then saw that the job, the job ran fine. However, the file creation failed, and it failed because the error was duplicate file. So I said, if it is a duplicate file, then can you tell me more about the file naming convention which is followed? So so based on the file naming convention, basically, like, it had on a high level the file name, and then towards the end he would append it with month and day and year. So if you see, it was day and not date. And because of that, a file which was generated on 14th April 2016 will have exactly the same name as of 14th January 2016. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. So it ended up. So tell me, I mean, I guess I'm curious to hear how the resolution happened, but it sounds like you found out what the bug was or what the issue was in that case.
So I found out the bug, and then another thing which was concerning to me is that, like, we have been using this, like, for like more than 2 years, because I had joined here in 2014. It's been 2 years. Why all of a sudden this error is happening now? So I just asked him, okay, that what happens after the files are generated? Like, do they stay in this location or they get archived? So he just checked, like, so there was an archival process which used to archive all files like within like a week. However, the destination which it would archive, that was full. So the archival job was failing. So all files were still present at that location. So this is why the error was occurring. So, and to fix it, like, I just told him first is to make a code change to basically have date instead of day, so that all files are unique, and work with the operations team in clearing up the file, like basically have additional memory so that it can be archived, and then replay all the missing data for this whole month. So there were all these 3 steps which I asked him to do. Are you able to understand, like, all these 3 steps?
Yeah, that makes sense. I'm curious, Anirudh, like, how did you? So, and please go further into the interview if you want, also. But I'm curious to hear, how would you think about preventing something like this from happening again, as well? Like, is there any sort of long-term perspective here of like, oh, is there a check in place, or like how can you ensure that this kind of error might not occur again?
Yeah. So I think as a long-term perspective, like all these things should be taken into account while uh, the product was originally designed. So uh, when like this whole integration feed was being worked on, it should have been caught at that point of time. So one is that, and second is I think which we are already doing is about that recon system. Yeah. So I think these are the top two which I feel should have been done correctly.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay, that's super helpful. And then, so how was the process of kind of going through those three steps and addressing those issues? Like, what was sort of the results and the outcome of that?
Sure. Yeah, and also one more thing is regarding the third step was that if any archival job is failing, there should be an alert for it.
Hmm.
So that way we know like what are the
You could
impacts.
detect the issue earlier as
Yeah,
opposed to finding out later, like you did. Yeah.
exactly. Yeah. So, sorry, what was your question?
I'm curious about the results. So, like,
Okay.
you went through these steps. What was the outcome of this process, and how did it go when you kind of like were working through those issues and resolving them?
Sure. So as an outcome, basically, like I asked him to replay all that data, and there was a lot of data. So it took our system like 2 or 3 days to get all the missing data.
Wow.
Yeah, but that was fine because we needed that data by the first of the next month. So I checked the next day, like we got some of the missing records, and by Monday, the whole recon system was fine. Like any missing accounts were pushed out, so we were good. And then even for month-end billing, like there were no missing accounts, so there was zero impact to billing or revenue.
Got it. And how did you communicate this error, this issue, when it was happening both during and after the process?
Sure. So while it was happening, I informed my manager about it, and I also informed my engineering stakeholder, like the dev manager. Uh, I did not notify any of the external stakeholders because I was quite positive that I could resolve it ahead of time, like instead of it having any business impact. Yeah, but if, for example, if it would have been like say almost close to month end, I would have definitely informed them earlier.
Got it. Cool. Super helpful example of resolving that problem outside of your team scope. Is there anything else that you want to add to that before we wrap and go to feedback and talk about how the interview answer was?
Um, I think I would just like to add that like situations like these, they happen a lot where there's a problem occurring and uh, no one wants to solve them. So I think as a PM, you should always try to find such opportunities and fix stuff because ultimately, like if you have to grow in an organization, that really counts a lot.
Super helpful. Yeah. Well, Anirudh, thanks so much for doing the interview. Now I want to talk a little bit about feedback and how it was for you. Do
Sure.
you have any self-reflection on how that was, what you were strong in, and what you might change with that interview answer?
I think in my view, my performance was decent enough. Maybe I could have given like uh, the multiple solutions which were explored. But for me, like this was the main solution which came to my mind, which would have solved it. But if I would have uh, deep dived more, I could have come up with other solutions too.
Totally. I would say that overall, some things that I wrote some notes throughout the interview as well. I think you did a great job context setting, and you clearly have a lot of expertise about this issue, and I think that was really clear. You also did an effective job of checking in with me and making sure that I was kind of following you through that process. It's really important, especially for technical interviews, that you do more check-ins because it can sometimes get a little hairy or some terms people might not know about. I think you did a great job presenting it as a story. Like I was wondering, like, what is the issue? Like, what could be going on? Why would it be one date, of all things? And I think you set that up well as a mystery that made me very engaged and curious about what was going on. Some pieces that I would recommend, like constructively, one, at the beginning, I did notice that your eye contact was sometimes a little all over. I know it's hard on video, and one tip that I actually give people with video interviews nowadays is to look directly at the camera. Don't even look at the screen. Like, I don't know if viewers can tell, like I'm looking at the screen, now I'm looking at the camera, now I'm looking at the screen.
Okay.
And it's actually really effective to just look at the camera. Also, if you're a little jittery and you're nervous, it can
Yeah.
make you feel a little bit better if you look at the camera and you don't have to look at the people exactly as they are. But of course, you want to read body language and things like that. So you might want to keep checking in. So that was one piece of feedback. And then the other feedback that I'd have is, I asked some questions around like, how was it communicated, or like, how did it affect other team members, things like that. Feel free to bring those in your interview answer as like, hey, Amazon has these leadership values that they care about a lot. And making sure that they are tied in your interview answer is really effective. And so it's an opportunity to talk a little bit more about your leadership, or your teamwork, or communication skills that Amazon might be looking for. So just keep that in mind. And for those of you interviewing for Amazon roles, be sure to review those before your interview. Anirudh, any thoughts, comments, reactions, or tips and hints for people watching this video that you think would be helpful for them?
I think one of the tips which I learned from Exponent is in any of these behavior questions, try to have more of a conversation rather than like trying to explain everything like over 5 minutes. So like instead of STAR methodology, I prefer that PAR, which is like problem, action, result. So try to explain your problem in 2 minutes. And if it's really big, then break it down into 2 parts, make sure the interviewer understands it, and then tell the remaining one. Similarly for action and result, try to tell exactly the reason on why you took that specific action, and try to have like multiple solutions on and decide on why you chose the one which you implemented. And for result, also try highlighting on what all metrics were impacted or how you measured that the problem was solved. So I think taking all these points into consideration will help you to have a solid answer.
Totally. And I think, Exponent and all these videos, we recommend a framework light approach. We don't recommend diving into a framework too religiously or too strongly, because it can seem very rehearsed when you answer it, and can seem kind of awkward, and you're sort of fitting something into a framework that might not actually make sense. So I think that's a really great point. Any other tips for folks interviewing for Amazon, Anirudh, that you might recommend people think about?
I think one is the leadership principles, like make sure to understand them like in and out, because even while it's not that you just interview and forget about them, even while working at Amazon, like you will be asked to work on projects, and if you violate any of these principles, like it won't look good on you. So try to really embrace them.
Thanks so much, Anirudh, for taking the time to be on the show. Really appreciate it. And it's awesome to see what an Amazon PM like yourself, how you'd go about answering one of these questions.
Yeah, sure. Thank you.
Thanks.